All right, so today I'm going to show you how to add Descope authentication to your Kotlin Android application using native flows. We're going to look at a sample app that demonstrates the key concepts, and then I'll walk through, based on the code in the sample app, how you can add this to your own Kotlin application. So first, let's start by looking at the basic structure of our sample app. This app has two main activities. It has a login activity class, which is what handles the user authentication. And then there's the main activity class, where the main screen and the user information, what they see after they've signed in, is presented. So this app uses a very simple architecture where authentication is required before accessing the main content that you see here. Now, before we can use Descope in your app, you need to set up a few things. So first, you'll need to, in your build.gradle.kts file, actually list the dependency for our Descope SDK. Then you'll need to initialize Descope in your application class. So in this application class, you can see I have this descope.setup here. All you'll need to do is, at the minimum, provide your project ID, which is what you find under project settings in the Descope console. You can also provide information for a debugger and things like that as well. Finally, you'll need to add the required permissions in your Android manifest.xml, including internet and access network state. Now let's look at how the login screen is implemented. The key components are the layout file, which is the activity login.xml. This contains things like the login button, the flow view, which actually is where the authentication UI is contained, as well as a close button and a few other things. And the login activity class, which implements the Descope flow view listener, which gives you override functions such as onReady, onSuccess, and onError. OnReady is what you use to call when the actual flow is ready to be shown. OnSuccess is what you use to perform logic after the user has successfully completed the flow and has been authenticated, as well as onError, which is called if something goes wrong within the flow. And you can make custom logic to handle these use cases. Now, it's important to note that Descope's native flows run in an embedded web view within the application. So this gives it a more native feel compared to just redirecting or opening up a separate browser. However, it still requires a flow be hosted somewhere. So where I'm actually defining my Descope flow, where I say flow view run, and where I passed in the URI of the flow, this right here is the web page in which my Descope flow exists on. So by default, every Descope project comes with a auth hosting page that you can use without hosting anything yourself. However, a lot of our customers, especially if you want to have background images and make the flow look even more native to the application, will typically host a version of this themselves or embed our flow component in their own web page that they then would redirect to using this URI here. And so whatever you prefer, you can control the environment in which the flow exists in, and that is what's rendered on the page. Finally, before we actually show like a demo of the application and walk through the steps of how you would run this in your own app, I want to go over the session management functionality of the SDK. So when the authentication succeeds, typically we'll create a session and we'll use the Descope session manager to do so. So as you can see here, descope.sessionmanager.manage session basically will create a session for you on success. And that session manager will handle the token storage, the token refresh, and just general secure storage of the credentials involved. You can check for valid sessions anywhere in your app, such as what we're doing in the main activity. As you can see here, in this private function ensure session, I basically get the session from the session manager, return true if it exists, or clear the session if the refresh token is expired. So you can control how the session is managed through the session manager in your app. So to recap, how you would walk through and add Descope in your own app, you would first have to sign up for a Descope account, create a project, get your project ID from the Descope console under project settings, add all of the dependencies and setup code that we covered earlier, create a login screen using Descope flow view, implement the Descope flow view listener, and use the Descope session manager to manage all the sessions within the application. Once you've done that, you have full native flows in your application. And now I would like to show you a quick demo of what this looks like. So if we click on this login button here, which remember was defined in the activity login XML, you can see the flow quickly runs and displays embedded in this web page. Now, If I type in kevin@descope.com, for example, and sign in with OTP, I get my code, and I'm signed in. Now, as you can see on the main activity page, what I'm doing here is I'm actually getting the session, the login ID of the session from the session manager and displaying it accordingly here. If I want to perform an API call, just as an example, sent to an API that accepts our Descope tokens, I can do so as well and try that out. And obviously I can log out as well using the session manager. And that's it. So as you can see, adding Descope to your Kotlin Android app is super straightforward and brings all the power of Descope flows, all of the customizability of them right into your application without any code changes. Once you've done these few simple steps, you can on the fly make changes to your flow, build in conditional logic and things like that without any changes to the repo itself. For more information about how you would handle things like deep linking with native OAuth and things like that, feel free to check out our docs as well as our other tutorials on our website.